Have you ever thought about, like, the real power of words when it comes to intimacy? I mean, it's not all about the physical stuff. Words can really spark a fire,
Yeah.
like maybe even more than touch alone.
Yeah, definitely.
And, I know our listeners are all about learning new things. So
Mm,
today we're diving deep into something I think you'll find fascinating.
for sure.
We're talking about the art and science of what some people call orgasmic dirty talk.
Right.
And we'll be exploring all the juicy details from Sean Bapier's book, Orgasmic Dirty Talk, How to Talk Dirty and Supercharge Her Orgasms.
Exactly. And that book really gets into why and how talking dirty can be such a game changer when it comes to a woman's arousal and pleasure.
Yeah.
And in this deep dive, we really want to break down the most important insights for you.
Right.
The stuff you can actually use so you can understand what makes this so powerful for so many women. And we want to do it without making it awkward or overwhelming you with too much information.
I think you said that perfectly. Yeah. We know that this is a topic that people have different comfort levels with. Of course. And that's totally okay.
For sure.
We're just here to explore the ideas and techniques that Bapier lays out in his book.
Absolutely.
So let's jump right in. Why bother with talking dirty in the first place?
Well, Bapier's main argument is basically this. For women, sex is mostly a mental thing.
Okay.
Of course, the physical connection is important too.
Right.
But the real driver of arousal and orgasm is what's going on in her mind.
Makes sense.
He lays out two main ideas. First, orgasm and pleasure are actually mental events. He even suggests that a woman can actually orgasm from dirty talk alone.
Wow, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, the mind is a powerful tool.
So if pleasure starts in the mind, how does dirty talk fit into all of this?
That's where his second idea comes in. The more aroused a woman is, the more pleasure she'll feel, and the better chance she has of having really intense orgasms.
Okay.
Maybe even multiple orgasms.
Wow.
And Bapier believes that dirty talk is one of the best ways to really get a woman mentally aroused. Right.
It builds anticipation.
Okay.
It makes her focus on the sensation she's feeling, and it brings in that hint of something forbidden, which can be really exciting for a lot of people.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. So it's all about stimulating her mind in just the right way.
Exactly.
And Bapier gives some pretty specific reasons why this works.
He does.
Right.
Yeah, he says that for a woman to really orgasm, she needs to stop overthinking and just let herself get lost in the physical sensations. And dirty talk helps her do that.
Okay.
It's like a mental guide that keeps her focused on the present moment and amplifies everything she's feeling.
Right.
It's like you're putting her arousal into words for her.
I see. And directing her attention to specific things.
Exactly.
He even gives that example like, you feel your clit throb when I touch your nipples, don't you?
That's exactly.
It's not really a question.
No.
It's more like a statement.
Right. It's about channeling your focus.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Bapier says that if she's really into it, she'll either actually feel that sensation more intensely.
Wow.
Or she'll do what he calls orgasmic alchemy.
What's that?
Well, it's basically like she'll kind of imagine the sensation so she can stay in that heightened state that you're creating.
That's really interesting.
It's about her wanting to follow your lead mentally.
Yeah, so it's like the power of suggestion on a whole other level.
Exactly.
Now, he also talks about how dirty talk can actually make the pleasure she's already feeling even stronger.
He does.
Right.
Yeah, he says you can do that by drawing her attention to exactly what she's experiencing.
Okay.
Like he gives these examples like saying, that feels even better while you're caressing her thigh, or that pleasure pulsates through your moistness even more, doesn't it, when you're touching her? It's like you're putting her sensations into words and validating them.
Right.
Which makes them even more real for her.
Yeah.
And he also says that dirty talk can keep her aroused even when you have to take a break from the physical stuff. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it keeps that mental connection going.
And it's not all about just the physical sensations either, right? Bapier also talks about the emotional side of things.
He does.
Yeah.
He says that dirty talk can make a woman feel really desired and sexy and feminine.
Right.
And hearing those things from a man she's attracted to can be really powerful.
Yeah.
But he does have this important thing he calls the cliche caveat.
What's that?
Well, he reminds us that everyone is different.
Okay.
And for some women, dirty talk might actually be more of a distraction than a turn-on.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Right.
Which makes the next part about the basics of effective dirty talk so important.
It is.
So where do you even begin if you're feeling kind of awkward or unsure about all of this?
Well, the first thing Bapier talks about is the discomfort that a lot of men feel.
Right.
This often comes from being afraid of saying the wrong thing or offending their partner or just feeling silly saying these things out loud. I could see that.
Yeah, he emphasizes that context is everything.
Right.
Like, things that would be totally inappropriate in a normal conversation can be really arousing in a sexual context.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The rules change when you're being intimate.
For sure.
He encourages guys to practice talking dirty, even if it's just saying phrases to themselves when they're alone or reading erotica, just to get more comfortable with the language.
So it's about getting over that initial awkwardness.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
He also talks about this idea of cognitive dissonance, which is that feeling you get when you're doing something that goes against your beliefs.
Right.
And how important it is to overcome that if you want to get good at talking dirty.
I see.
He compares it to learning any new skill, like riding a bike. It might feel unnatural at first, but with practice, it becomes more fluid.
So you just have to push past that initial discomfort.
Right.
Now, Baby lays out 4 main principles for making dirty talk effective. So let's go through those.
Okay, the first principle is say it with absolute conviction.
Okay.
He says this is all about sexual confidence.
Right.
If you sound hesitant or unsure, it just won't have the same impact.
I see.
You need to lead the sexual dance, he says, and guide her mind with your voice.
So it's about embodying that desire and taking charge.
Exactly.
Which can be pretty arousing in itself.
It can.
What's the second principle?
The second principle is feel it in your marrow.
Okay.
This means you have to really mean what you're saying.
Right.
Focus on your own arousal,
Okay.
how much you enjoy her and her body,
Right.
and let those feelings fuel your words.
So it shouldn't feel like you're just reciting lines.
No.
It needs to be genuine.
Exactly.
Okay, what about the third principle?
The third principle is she's on your team. This one is meant to be reassuring.
Okay.
He basically says that generally speaking, a woman isn't going to make fun of you during sex.
Right.
She wants to connect with you on a deeper level. And dirty talk can help you do that.
So it's okay to let go of some of that self-consciousness.
Right.
What's the last principle?
The fourth principle is begin slow and calibrate.
Okay.
He says you should start with more sensual descriptions
Right.
and gradually introduce the dirtier talk as she gets more aroused.
I see.
If you're new to this, he even suggests starting with just sounds like moans and grunts,
Okay.
just to ease into it.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Then
Yeah.
you can move on to talking about her body in more neutral terms
Yeah.
before you get to the really explicit stuff.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And the calibrate part means you need to pay attention to how she's reacting
Right.
and adjust your approach accordingly.
So don't overwhelm her.
Exactly.
To make sure you're on the same page.
Right.
Now, Bapier also addresses some common questions that beginners have.
He does.
And I think these will be really helpful for our listeners.
Yeah.
So what are some of the anxieties that he talks about?
Well, one of the most common ones is, what if I feel uncomfortable?
And Bapier's response is basically that it's totally normal to feel that way.
Right.
He compares it to learning any new skill,
Yeah.
like we were talking about before.
Uh-huh.
He says that practice is key.
Right.
And encourages you to talk to your partner about it and
Yeah.
make sure she's being supportive.
That's important.
He also connects feeling comfortable to your own beliefs about sex. If you enjoy sex and don't feel ashamed of it,
Right.
and you're confident in your actions and words, your partner is more likely to respond positively.
Yeah.
He also says to focus on your own thoughts
Okay.
and not try to guess what she's thinking.
So your own comfort level is often the biggest obstacle.
Often it is.
What's another common worry?
Another big one is, what if I sound silly?
Right.
Bapier says this might happen if you're not projecting confidence
I see.
or if she's not fully in what he calls a sexual trance.
What's that?
It's basically like a state of deep absorption
Okay.
where she's so focused on the sensations.
That it's almost like she's hypnotized by pleasure.
Wow.
And your dirty talk can help her get into that state.
So it's about guiding her with your words.
Exactly.
He also talks about the importance of focusing on her pleasure.
He does.
Right.
Yeah. He gives a good example. Saying, I love your cock is more powerful than just saying, I love cock.
Yeah.
Because it's directed at her and it
Right.
makes her feel special.
That makes sense.
It's all about making her the center of attention.
Okay, now what about the fear of offending her?
Well, Bapier says that the context changes when you're both aroused.
Okay.
As she gets more turned on, dirty talk isn't as likely to offend her.
Right.
In fact, he thinks it can actually reinforce her positive feelings and desires about sex,
I see.
especially with someone she trusts and respects.
Yeah.
He emphasizes again that a woman's sexuality is mostly mental,
Right.
and that dirty talk is a really powerful tool for mental stimulation.
And he makes it clear that dirty talk isn't just about being crude or using bad language.
He does.
Yeah. He addresses the question, Isn't dirty talk just a stream of obscenities? Head on.
Okay.
He says that real dirty talk is specifically designed to arouse your partner.
Right.
It's not about being mean or degrading or abusive.
I see.
It's about making the experience more pleasurable for her.
So the intention behind the words is what matters.
Exactly.
It's about positive arousal,
Right.
not negativity.
Yeah.
What's the last question he covers that beginners might have?
The last one is a very practical question.
Yeah.
What if I run out of things to say?
That's a good one.
Yeah, and Babier has some good advice.
Okay.
He says you can just describe what you're doing in detail or tell her what she's feeling.
Right.
You can also use different words that mean the same thing or even repeat yourself. He says repetition can be really effective.
Especially when she's really aroused.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he reminds us that it's okay to have moments of silence.
Right.
You don't have to talk constantly.
Yeah.
It's more about the quality of what you say than the quantity.
I think those are all really helpful and reassuring answers.
I do too.
Now, Bapier also gives some do's and don'ts for dirty talk,
He does.
which I think are really important.
They are.
So what are some of the key things to keep in mind?
Okay. On the don't side,
Okay.
he says you shouldn't talk about your own pleasure more than hers.
Right.
He recommends keeping about 80% of your dirty talk focused on her sensations.
Makes sense.
If you talk too much about yourself, it can be distracting.
Yeah.
Also, never use words she doesn't like that
Right.
can really break the mood.
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
And don't use all your best material too early.
Right.
Start slow and build up the intensity.
Okay.
He also says you shouldn't only use dirty talk in your relationship. Mix it up with more emotional and sensual talk
Okay.
to keep things interesting.
Yeah.
And don't mention your own pleasure right at the beginning.
Okay.
You want her to focus on her own feelings first.
So it's all about keeping the focus on her experience
Exactly.
and building the intensity slowly.
Right.
What about the DOs?
Well, he emphasizes speaking clearly even when you're whispering.
Right.
So she doesn't misunderstand anything.
Yeah.
He says the goal is to arouse her with confidence,
Right.
not to humiliate her,
Right.
and that the more into it she gets, the
Yeah.
more explicit your dirty talk can be.
Okay.
He also stresses the importance of saying what she wants to hear,
Right.
not just what you want to say.
So it's really about her.
It is.
Yeah.
And he says you should avoid asking questions like, do you like this? Or am I pleasing you?
Okay.
Because that can make you sound insecure.
Yeah, I can see that.
He also says that after sex, you should just relax into the silence
Okay.
instead of feeling like you have to fill it with words.
That's a good tip.
Yeah, and avoid using childish or clinical terms for body parts.
Right.
Stick to more evocative language.
Okay.
And finally, he says to never force it.
Right.
Let it flow naturally for
Yeah.
both of you.
Those are some really solid guidelines.
Well, I think so.
Now, for someone who's just starting to experiment with dirty talk, how does Bapier suggest they introduce it?
He has a few ideas.
Okay, let's hear them.
One is to simply tell her what you want in a calm and assertive way.
Not asking?
No, just telling.
Okay.
This shows her that you're confident and in control.
I like that.
Another method is whispering in her ear.
Okay.
You can use this to describe how good it feels to be close to her,
Right.
how good she smells,
Uh-huh.
how soft her skin is,
Okay.
how she makes you feel.
Yeah.
Your tone of voice is really important here.
Whispering definitely adds a level of intimacy and secrecy.
It does.
What are some other ways to introduce dirty talk?
He suggests reading erotica to her. This is a good way to start with someone else's words
Okay.
and see how she reacts.
Right.
You can even bookmark parts that she really enjoys
Yeah.
and maybe use those themes later on.
I see.
And finally, he suggests complimenting her body and praising her.
Yeah.
This can be really effective if you're genuine about it,
Right.
especially if you focus on parts of her body that she might be self-conscious about.
That's a good point.
But he does say you shouldn't overdo it with the compliments
Okay.
because they can start to sound insincere
Yeah.
if you use them too much.
I see.
Yeah.
Those are some really good ideas for getting started.
They are.
Now, something that Bapier talks about a lot is calibration.
He does.
So what does that mean when it comes to dirty talk?
Calibration is all about paying attention to how your partner is responding,
Okay.
both verbally and non-verbally.
Right.
So you can figure out what she likes and dislikes
Mhm.
and how far she's comfortable going.
Makes sense.
He says her mood and her preferences are really important,
Okay.
and he gives 5 keys to successful calibration.
Okay, let's hear those 5 keys.
The first key is to use language that you're comfortable with,
Okay.
and then gradually work your way up to dirtier language.
So start with what feels natural for you.
Right. And then see how she responds.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to try out more explicit words as you get more confident.
Yeah.
The second key is that some women like it sweet and some like it filthier.
Right.
You can figure this out by giving her commands and seeing how she reacts.
Okay.
Also, pay attention to the language she uses and try using similar words back to her.
So it's about testing the waters and being observant.
Exactly.
What about the other 3 keys?
The third key is to start slow
Okay.
and get dirtier as she gets more aroused.
Right.
Start with sensual descriptions and then gradually increase the intensity as she gets more turned on.
Okay.
He says that right before orgasm is often when a woman is most receptive to really dirty talk.
That's interesting.
Yeah. The fourth key is to use variety.
Variety in what?
In how often you talk dirty when you do it and how explicit you are.
So mix things up.
Exactly.
Okay, what's the last key?
The last key is to pay attention to her signals.
Both verbal and nonverbal.
And he goes into detail about what those signals might be.
He does.
Yeah.
Yeah, he breaks them down into short and long versions.
Okay, let's start with the short version.
All right, the short version includes things like sounds.
Like moans and stuff.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
It also includes vocal insinuations.
Like what?
Like the way she says things.
Okay.
Her body language.
Like if she's arching her back or tensing her muscles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And her vocal tone.
Right.
You also want to pay attention to if she's not making any sounds or if
Yeah.
she's not showing any positive body language. Like if she's hesitant or avoiding certain topics or changing the subject. You want to see how she reacts to specific phrases and words and how explicit you are.
Yeah.
And if she likes being called certain names.
Okay.
Positive signals are things like louder moans,
Okay.
smiles,
Right.
nods, eager compliance.
Yeah.
And if she's sending you dirty messages, negative signals are things like if she's reluctant to answer, or if she changes the subject, or if she looks unenthusiastic or confused.
So you're saying it's really important to pay attention to her reactions.
It is.
And never push her further than she's comfortable going.
Exactly.
Now, what about the long version of calibration signals?
For verbal signal,
Yeah.
he talks about her telling you directly what she likes and dislikes,
Right.
and the pacing and leading of her language.
What does that mean?
Well, it means you should try to match her tempo and vocabulary,
Okay.
and then gradually guide her towards using more explicit language. He also says to pay attention to the sounds she makes.
Like moans and groans and stuff.
Right, and to the things she doesn't say.
What do you mean?
Well, just because she's not complaining
No.
doesn't necessarily mean she's enjoying herself.
I see.
Silence or a lack of enthusiasm can be a sign that she's uncomfortable. But she might not want to say anything because she doesn't want to seem rude or spoil the mood.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, what about nonverbal signals?
Well, he talks about neutral expressions,
Okay.
which can be hard to interpret.
Yeah.
He says to look for genuine smiles as opposed to frowns. He also says that if her breathing is getting faster or deeper,
Okay.
that could be a good sign.
I see.
And if she's tensing up or pulling away,
Yeah.
that's probably a sign that she doesn't like what you're doing.
So basically, you need to look for multiple cues
Yes.
to get a good read on how she's feeling.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, what if you want to encourage her to talk dirty, too?
Bapier has some advice for that as well.
Great. Let's hear it.
He suggests using commands and assertive questions
Right.
like, you like it when or that feels good, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He also says you should tell her how much it turns you on when she talks dirty and that you should lead by example.
Okay.
If you talk dirty to her,
Yeah.
she's more likely to start doing it too.
Especially as she gets more aroused.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, what about role playing?
Bapier sees role-playing as a good way to ease into using more explicit language,
Okay.
especially if you're feeling hesitant about it
Nice.
because you're adopting a persona.
Right.
It can feel less personal.
Makes sense.
He suggests asking her about her favorite erotica authors
Okay.
or trying out some safe role plays
Like what?
like college student professor or patient doctor.
Okay.
The key is to really get into the role
Right.
by changing your names and voices,
Yeah.
maybe even dressing up.
So role-playing can create a safe space for experimenting with different language.
Exactly.
Now, Bapier also talks about improving your voice.
He does.
What kind of advice does he give?
He says that a deep, resonant voice is really important
Okay.
because it conveys confidence and authority.
Right.
He suggests practicing moving the vibration from your throat down to your chest to create a smoother, richer sound.
I see.
He says that a thin or high-pitched voice can actually make your words less effective.
So it's about embodying that confidence, not just with your words,
Right.
but also with the way you say them.
Exactly.
He also talks about improving your vocabulary.
He does.
Why is that important?
Having a larger vocabulary allows you to use more vivid descriptions
Okay.
and adapt to your partner's preferences more easily.
Right.
It's especially helpful for narrating fantasies.
Makes sense.
He even gives some examples of verbs and slightly more explicit words that you can use.
So having a richer vocabulary allows for more creativity and nuance.
It does.
Now, he also lists different flavors of dirty talk.
He does.
What are some of the types he mentions?
He talks about giving commands,
Okay.
telling her what you want, reading erotica,
Mm-hmm.
complimenting her body,
Yeah.
using sensual descriptions that lead to more explicit ones,
Okay.
describing what you're doing,
Right.
telling her what she's feeling,
Definitely.
and using assertive questions.
And you should always match the intensity of your language to her arousal level.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, start gently and then get more explicit as she gets more turned on.
So there are a lot of different ways to talk dirty.
There are.
It's not just one thing.
Right.
Now, Bapier also has a section called Dirty Talk, a philosophical inquiry.
He does.
What's the main point of that section?
In that section, he wants you to think about the WHY behind your dirty talk.
Okay.
It's not just about memorizing phrases. It's about understanding your intentions and what kind of experience you want to create for her.
I see.
He encourages you to ask yourself questions like,
Yeah.
what do you want to do to her?
Okay.
What do you want her to do to you?
Uh-huh.
How do you want her to feel?
Right.
And then to convey those answers with as much detail and passion as you can.
So it's about coming from a place of genuine desire and intention,
Exactly.
not just reciting lines.
Right.
Now, he also has a section on how to say your dirtiness. What are the key principles there?
Well, he has 3 main points.
Okay.
First, the more detail and passion you put into your language, the more powerful it will be.
Okay.
But it's not just about the words themselves.
Right.
It's about conveying your desire and giving her permission to express hers.
I see.
Second, the effectiveness of your dirty talk depends on how vivid it is,
Okay.
how much emphasis you put into it, how well you can lead her, and how confident you are.
Makes sense.
And third, you should focus on how much you enjoy her
Yeah.
and let that feeling fuel your words.
That's a good point.
He also talks about the importance of tonality. He says you should use a confident tone of voice
Right.
that takes the lead.
Not one that sounds hesitant or unsure.
Exactly.
So it's about telling her questions with conviction.
Right.
The confident tone is really key.
It is.
Now, he also talks about 5 levels of dirty talk.
He does.
What are those?
The first level is sounds.
Like moans and growls.
Exactly. The second level is romantic talk.
Okay.
Like, it feels so good to be this close to you.
Yeah.
The third level is sensually descriptive language.
Okay.
Like, I want to slide deep inside you. The fourth level is narrated fantasies.
Based on her desires.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the fifth level is explicit dirty talk.
Yeah.
Like, make that body come for me.
Wow.
He suggests using all 5 levels throughout your encounter,
Okay.
pacing them according to how aroused she is,